I'm not in Vegas anymore. It is not hot by any stretch of the imagination, other than right where I'm sitting, because you can probably just see the glow if you're watching the video of the heater, which is running up there above my head in what is today a rainy and by my standards at least cold Oslo. Now my standards put cold at 16 degrees apparently at the moment. So between the time I left here to go over to the US and coming back, which was about 3 weeks, we somehow seem to have gone from like summer to quasi-summer. Gone to our Aussie winter is pretty much what it is now, except there's more rain here. Be that as it may, I'm only here for another day before I do head back to Australia. So I'll get to go back and get some nice sunshine. And with any luck, when I do this video next week, I'll be sitting on my boat in the sun in a nice picturesque spot, not underneath a great big freaking heater over my head. So anyway, I'll hopefully come to you somewhere very nice, or from somewhere very nice next week. Now, while that we're here, boy oh boy, where do we start today? With coffee, by virtue of the fact that someone decided to ring my doorbell at 2:30 in the morning, don't know who, but I then spent the next hour and a half trying to get back to sleep. So, moving on. Things that happened. Number one, 2 days from now, on the 18th, what's today, 16th? Yes, on the 18th of August, version 2 or earlier of the Have I Been Pwned API, any of the endpoints that allow you to search by email addresses will stop working. Now, I announced this, it would have been about 4 weeks ago, because I gave bang on 1 month's notice about rolling over to V3. V3 requires an API key. You need to go and pay $3.50 to get a key, not so that I can line my pockets with your money, but so that I can pay, number one, for the Azure API management service that it sits on, and number two, and also, by the way, hey, I'm going to tell you something. I've realized an interesting flaw in my mathematics, which I'll come back to. But number two, to add some barrier to entry for non-legitimate users of the API. If, there's going to be a terrible stereotype, but if you are someone trying to distribute many requests across Eastern European IP addresses in order to try and enumerate through records, you're going to need to come up with a credit card, which is going to then identify you. You're probably not going to be very keen on doing that. And so far, that's been the experience. V3 of the API has got great adoption. Still a lot of people on V2, going to die in 2 days, but it does have great adoption. Many people have rolled over to that. It's running beautifully. The little bit which is the flaw in my mathematics, and this is something I really want to talk more with Microsoft about as well, is when I wrote the original blog post, I think I worked out that $3.50 a month was effectively what it would cost to make 1 million API queries. But with the rate limit, you could make 1.5 million a month, but I figure it's going to average out. Not everyone's going to try and use all of it. Plus the $3.50 I've got to give Stripe a little bit, doesn't cover the cost of actually running the egress bandwidth and the API functions which sit underneath, but functions are cheap, don't worry about that. The bit which is interesting is when I look at successful versus failed requests to V3 API. Now, failed request is when API management hits you with the rate limit hammer and says, no, you've tried too soon. When there's a failed request, you still pay for it. Now, this is the difference between Azure API management and Cloudflare. So Cloudflare, for the longest time, have had a rate limit model where they've said, look, we're going to sort of set a rate limit. If you get hammered above the rate limit, we're not going to charge you for that, because if someone comes along and tries to DDoS you off the planet, well, we don't want you to suddenly get massive unexpected bills. API management, on the other hand, if you make too many requests to that, they're like, okay, we're going to return 429, literally HTTP 429, which is too many requests. You're going to pay for that because we have to process it. Now, I can see why Microsoft makes that point. The problem is, and this is what I'm now realizing from my perspective, is that when I did the mathematics and said, oh, I'll charge $3.50 a month, because if you make 1.5 or 1 million legitimate requests, that's what it costs, it doesn't cover all the non-legitimate requests. Now, I'm finding, and I've got to go check my stats a bit more carefully as well, but it looks like there's about 1 successful request per 1 failed request. It's almost a 1-to-1 ratio, which basically means it's costing me twice as much as I thought. Now, this is not like I'm then going to go, hey, I'm going to up the price or something like that, because I think that when I look across the spectrum of users, most users are using it to a fraction of what they could if they wanted to sort of max it out anyway. So it's not that. And again, one of the reasons for the whole credit card thing in the first place was just to try and separate the legitimate users from the illegitimate users. That bit's working perfectly. But it is curious the way that rate limit is charged. And how do I feel about that? I can see both sides of the story. Anyway, incidentally, some of you may have noticed this if you're using V3, I do still use Cloudflare rate limits on top of that. Now those rate limits are per IP address, but they're there to try and make sure if someone hammers it too hard from one IP address, let's say they just have like no sleep period at all, they set it going and then they go on holidays or something, at least Cloudflare will stop those requests falling through, and then because I'm not paying for it, if Cloudflare is blocking it, then that's great because it doesn't fall through and then hit API management, which I do have to pay for if it blocks it. I wonder if I can probably do this. I wonder if I can even see on like a per API token basis, is there like 1 or 2 tokens where they just keep hammering the bejesus out of it? And what I could even, I'm thinking out loud here, what I could even do is I could take those API keys if they're like really hammering it too much, and I could call the Cloudflare API to put a rule on Cloudflare to then block the API at that level so it doesn't fall through, or block the API key at that level so it doesn't fall through and hit API management. That'd be a clever idea, wouldn't it? You can do really, really cool stuff with Cloudflare workers. So that is what's coming up with the API management stuff. So keep that in mind if you are using Have I Been Pwned. I think I said I'd just start returning, was it 400, 401, whatever HTTP status code I said, that's going to start getting returned in a couple of days' time. There will be a response body which says, hey, go and read this blog post because this is the blog post where I told everyone about this. Oh, one other thing on this too. An advantage, which I hadn't really thought through when I put API management in place, is to date, I have never known who's using the API. It's like, it's free and there's no auth, just go and do cool stuff. Please don't be a dick, yada, 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 yada. So I had no idea who's using it. Now, I know who's using it. And there's 2 interesting advantages to that. One is that it's really super cool to see some of the organizations that are using the API. Many, many big companies that you guys know of as well, that I never knew used it. And it's like, wow, it's those guys. This is really cool to see them using it. The other advantage is that if ever I need to make changes in the future, I actually know who's using it. Because at the moment, it's just like me talking into this video, writing blog posts, putting out a few tweets. There's going to be plenty of people using the API who don't know that it's going to be changing. This is one of these sort of crossroads of like anonymity and privacy versus actually making shit work. Like it's been good not to have people identify themselves from a privacy perspective, but then if I don't know who's using it, then I don't know who to tell that it's changing. So if ever there are changes further down the road from V3, at least now I know who's using it and I can get in touch with people. And that's a pretty important thing when there's actually dependencies on the service running. All right, so that's that one. Data breach. I loaded a new data breach today, a new old data breach today, from Chegg. So Chegg does like online textbook rental, as best I can tell. They popped up in the news in about April last year, 40 million records. So 40 million of their users were in there. Every one of the 40 million who is a Have I Been Pwned subscriber, which I think is about 90,000 of them, got emails from me this morning, so I sent another 90,000 emails. And I think I sent about another 13,000 to individuals, organisations monitoring domains as well. So there's a bunch of emails gone out from Have I Been Pwned this morning. The most noteworthy thing about Chegg is passwords in MD5 not even salted. In 2018, for God's sake, how do we get there? Because the thing is, like, there was a time where you'd go, passwords in MD5, okay, this is the norm. And then there was a time where it was like, probably shouldn't be doing that anymore. We should be using, WASP B? It's gone. Then there was a time where we kind of went, all right, there's the SHA variants and that sort of thing, but we really should be going towards adaptive hashing algorithm, bcrypt. We really should be moving over. And that time, honestly, was probably about 6 or 7 years ago. In 2019, 2018, as it was for them, to have passwords, like people must have known that. There must have been people in Chegg going, this isn't good. I can imagine there would have been someone in Chegg who was the same person that I was back in my enterprisey days, looking at some of the security practices, just going, guys, this is absolute crap. Like, why are you doing this? We're going to have a serious incident one day. And they'll be, well, there's business imperatives. We need to deliver features. There's budget constraints, all the rest of it and all the other stuff. And there's probably someone sitting in Chegg at the time, like tearing their hair out the way I was tearing my hair out. And now their data's in Have I Been Pwned. Now, of course, the data breach would have happened whether they were using bcrypt or MD5. Don't get me wrong, that's still going to be a bad day. But the problem is you've now got 40 million passwords that are going to be really, really readily retrievable. So bad news there. Good news, EV is dead. Oh boy. Where do we begin here? Didn't this start some fights? Now, I have been a somewhat vocal opponent of EV for many years. And we'll just do a quick recap of why. I've written many, many things about EV in the past. So, quick recap. EV, Extended Validation Certificates. Functionally, they work the same as any other certificate, a DV certificate or an OV certificate. You get a padlock on the browser, you get HTTPS, you get protection from eavesdropping, so you get confidentiality, you get protection from modification, so you get integrity, you get protection from your traffic being redirected to a completely different host, so you get authenticity. So you know that when you go to, let's say, this video on YouTube, youtube.com, it's going to return a certificate, it's all over HTTPS, you know that you're on that site. All those different Vs, the O, the E and the D, work the same way there. EV used to be extensive identity verification processes. Still is extensive identity verification processes. You've got to prove that, for example, you're a legal registered entity. You've got to prove identity documents. You will get, as of today, you will get the entity name up in the address bar next to the URL. Now the fun bits. Chrome has for quite some time been testing removing EV. And the reason they've been testing it is because it doesn't really work. Now that statement alone, people get very upset. But think it through, right? So EV is a visual indicator in the browser. Now each browser gets to choose what it looks like. Chrome used to make it green, now they've made it grey as of late last year. Firefox, as of today, it's still green. So a few little idiosyncrasies there, it's up to the client to decide. The browser gets to decide what it looks like. There is no like standardized spec of EV must be shown in the browser in this way. There's no standard or anything like that. So it is a visual indicator. Now, the commercial CAs will have you believe that that visual indicator does a number of different things. Number one, it gives people more confidence in your brand. So they will say, particularly for smaller businesses trying to create an air of authenticity, they'll say you should get EV because people will see the name there and they will trust it more. The other argument they make time and time again is that it reduces the likelihood of phishing. Now both of these are bullshit and I'll explain why. So number one, recognizing the brand. Go and have a look at the world's top websites. Facebook, eBay, what are some other good ones? Amazon, Google. Go and have a look at these. In your browser today, which actually, depending on which browser you're using, it won't show it. If you're using Chrome on any mobile device, it won't show it. If you're using Safari on iOS, it won't show it, so long as you're running the current generation of iOS. But if you were to go in Chrome or Firefox on the desktop and you have a look at every one of those brands, websites, you will not see EV. So part of the problem is that people are not conditioned to expect it in the first place. So that is a pretty key point. To then have that brand name appear on some small site and somehow say, people are going to trust you more because they see something that they're not used to seeing anyway, and they don't see on the big guys. I don't care if you've done studies or not. It doesn't make any sense. I'll come back to studies too because they're kind of weird. Now, the phishing bit. The argument about phishing is that someone can say, hey, if I go to, let's say your bank, because a lot of banks have EV. If I go to the bank and I don't see EV, then it could be a phishing site. In fact, phishing is sort of a multifaceted value proposition as far as CAs are concerned. But let's do this bit first. So let's say I go to, say, the National Australia Bank. If I go to National Australia Bank today, it says National Australia Bank up there in the address bar. And let's just clarify, separately to the address. It is a separate marker on both Chrome and Firefox and the other one. What's the other one? Kidding. Internet Explorer today. Now, and Edge. Forgot Edge. It's very easy to forget Edge. Anyway, so it's on all of those browsers. Now, here's the problem. For EV to have any effectiveness in terms of changing behaviour, so people becoming suspicious of a potential phishing site, the only way it works is that if someone was to go to National Australia Bank and not see EV, they'd have to leave. Because what if it's like nationalaustriabank.com? If that doesn't exist, you might want to register that now quickly. nationalaustriabank.com. and you go there and you just get a padlock. And remember, Chrome used to say secure, it doesn't say that anymore, hasn't done since Octoberish last year. You see the padlock. Will someone still trust that website, or will they go, hang on a moment, I know this website's meant to have EV, and I'm not seeing EV, therefore I'm going to leave. There's a couple of problems with that. Number one is that first of all, you have to know what EV is. And most people do not know what EV is. Most technical people do not know what EV is. I know this because I do talks with hundreds of people in the room, and I'm like, who knows what EV is? And there's like 3 people with beards who put their hand up, and that's it. That is it. Like, there's this really, really tiny portion of people that actually know what EV is. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you do know what it is, you have to know which sites are meant to have it and which sites are not. Because the only way you're going to leave that National Austria Bank phishing site is if you know that the real site is meant to have it. And try this mind test, right? So think about a bunch of the world's largest websites. Which ones have EV? I just gave you a few which we know don't. What about, we'll pick a good example. Let's say it's like Baidu, all right? So Baidu, in case you don't know what it is, it's one of the world's largest websites. It's a big freaking search engine in China. Is Baidu meant to have an EV certificate? You don't know until you go and look at it. What about Twitter? Twitter's a funny one because from time to time they either do or they don't. What about PayPal? I've written about PayPal before. They used to have the EV indicator. It's now not there for reasons. Google Troy Hunt PayPal and you'll see. So it really just does not make any sense. People don't know what it is, and even if they do know what it is, they don't know which sites are meant to have it and which ones aren't. So there's that bit. The other bit, and Scott and I were talking about this, was it last week or the week before when we were in Vegas? It started to rain. Jeez. All right. I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to put it on the chair under the cover here because in true this time of year Oslo form, it's now wet. All right. On with the show. So Scott and I were talking about this the other day where he said, Sectigo came out and they did this study, right? Now this study, well, actually they... Let me try and pick the right words. They made a financial contribution for an educational institution to do a study. Always a bit suspicious when there's a financial contribution. I'm not saying that they rigged it. I'm just saying that it does feel a little bit like perverse incentives, rightly or wrongly. Maybe it's just me. So anyway, and this study came out and said something like 99.97% of sites with EV are not phishing sites. Now there's just like fundamental issues with this. One of the fundamental issues is, that's great, what about DV? What's the percentage for DV? They don't know because they didn't look at that. So how does the 99.97, and I don't know if that's the exact number, but hypothetically, how does that make any sense unless you know what you're comparing it to? Because DV might be like 99.96. I'm sure EV is better because the barrier to entry of getting EV is harder. Fishers like making things easy. You know what? Everyone likes making things easy. Fishers really like making things easy. So unless you can have something to compare it to, it doesn't make any sense in isolation. The other thing is that just because National Australia Bank has an EV site and it is not a phishing site, doesn't stop Fisherman from coming along and going, I'm now going to create National Austria Bank and put a DV certificate on it. It doesn't stop that. And it doesn't stop people trusting that because people don't know what EV is and they don't know which sites are meant to have it, even if they do know what it is, so nothing works. So that was a very long-winded way of getting to the point of this actual blog post, which was to comment on the changes being made by both Chrome and Firefox. And I'm just going to make sure I hit all the important points I put here in this post. So, Chrome, as of 77, is removing the EV indicator. Now, 77 is going to hit next month. So this is important. Next month, currently scheduled for September 10, there will be no more EV indicator in Chrome. Now, here's Google's announcements about it. They said, on HTTP... Let's try this with coffee. On HTTPS websites using EV certificates, Chrome currently displays an EV badge to the left of the URL bar. Starting in version 77, Chrome will move this UI to page info, which is accessed by clicking the lock icon. Now, this is important. They're not actually getting rid of it altogether. They're just removing it from what you normally see in the browser when you load the page. You can still drill down and see it. So if you're one of these really rare people who know what EV is, and if you're one of those exceptionally rare people which both know what EV is and know which sites are meant to have it, and you actually want to check that stuff, you can. You click. That's it. Not hard. Firefox. Firefox is going to take it out of Firefox 70. Firefox 70 is due to hit on October 22. Now, here's what Mozilla said. In desktop Firefox 70, we intend to remove extended validation, EV, indicators from the identity block, the left-hand side of the URL bar, which is used to display security privacy information. Now, this only got announced during this last week. This is really, really significant. What's especially significant is the reasons they gave. Now, Scott and I have been beating this drum for literally years, and now this thing is finally coming home to pass. So, Chrome says, through our own research as well as a survey of prior academic work, the Chrome Security UX team has determined that the EV UI does not protect users as intended. Users do not appear to make secure choices, such as not entering password or credit card information, when the UI is altered or removed, as would be necessary for EV UI to provide meaningful protection. So again, that wording, they don't change their behavior when EV is removed. That's the only way EV works. Firefox. So Mozilla has said the effectiveness of EV has been called into question numerous times over the last few years. There are serious doubts whether users will notice the absence of positive security indicators, and proof of concepts have been pitting EV against domains for phishing. They're basically just saying the same sort of thing that I just went through in my whole intro. It just doesn't make any sense. Mozilla then went on and said, more recently it has been shown that EV certificates with colliding entity names can be generated by choosing a different jurisdiction. This goes back to Ian Carroll registering Stripe Inc. in another state to the Stripe that's a credit card payment processor, getting an EV certificate, and then not standing up a phishing page, but just standing up a page going, this is not the credit card processor, but hey, have a look up there in the address bar, it says Stripe. So they're basically calling back to a whole bunch of evidence and industry research and all sorts of other things that make a lot of sense, that precisely highlight exactly the stuff we've been saying for so long. Now, I'm sounding a little bit excited about this because I am, because we've known that EV has been bullshit for a very long time. We've known that certificate authorities, commercial certificate authorities, have been peddling it because they're having a lot of trouble selling DV, because the likes of Let's Encrypt and Bypass, based here in Norway. If you're from Bypass, let me know, because I'd love to come and see you guys during one of my Oslo trips. And I'm going to actually try and reach out. So, because you can go and get it for free from these entities, and I mentioned Bypass as well as Let's Encrypt because they actually implement Acme protocol as well, which makes renewals and automation and everything very, very easily. They basically killed off the commercial market, or a significant part of it. So commercial CAs have really struggled. They've put a lot of weight on EV. This kills the EV argument. Now, here's where I reckon the blog post gets kind of interesting. I have then gone on and I said, have a look at how EV is marketed. And I've got a bit here which is from, I'm pretty sure this one is from Sectego, which is screen caps of their EV value proposition page. Basically about half of the stuff that they promote EV on, they're going to have to delete. They cannot say this anymore because it's no longer true. So for example, let me just check. I'm going to just check that this is Sectego so I don't sort of blame the wrong company. It is Sectego. All right, so here's a statement which I've highlighted in red, which they're going to have to get rid of. When an EV certificate is loaded on a site, browsers will display additional trust indicators, including the company name and a green browser address bar. Just, again, remember it hasn't been green in the world's most comprehensively used browser since last year, but anyway. Commonly referred to as the green address bar, even though it's not green, or branded address bar, fair enough. This interface element tells users they are interacting with the intended online business and not a scammy imposter, unless it's Stripe.inc. It's literally like giving commercial CAs more rope and just letting them hang themselves. All right, so they've got to get rid of that. They've got to get rid of something else, which is only like one sentence down. Displaying the company name in the browser has been shown to build visitor confidence and improve engagement with sites, increasing purchases, use of online services, and the sharing of personal information. This is just bullshit. And it's bullshit because the browser vendors have gone out and obviously looked at this very objectively. They don't have any commercial reason to get rid of it. Commercial CAs do have a commercial reason to keep it. So where do you think the motivations are? So anyway, there's that. And then the other part of that paragraph is, with multiple e-commerce sites finding a significant increase in transactions when testing green address bars, including such visual security indicators, can deliver a boost in engagement with your information services. As I've pointed out in blog posts before, even the online e-commerce services that the CAs have been using to highlight the value of EV, even the ones that are still in marketing paraphernalia today stopped using EV ages ago. And you look at them today and it's like, let's encrypt. There's a couple. There's one was Mostly Dead. So there's a Mostly Dead, I think it's mostlydead.com. It's like a record label or something. And the other one was, what was the other one? It was like a cutlery website or something. And Komodo, as they were in the day, was using them to promote, here's how important EV is. They've increased transactions and sales and things. And yeah, let's encrypt now. DV. Now they've got to take away half of their bullet points in the visible trust indicator. This visible trust indicators thing is such crap. Half the visible trust indicators have to go. So out of the 6 indicators, 3 they have to get rid of. 1, displays organisation name in the browser. 2, activates the green address bar in most browsers. Okay, good. We've recognised not every browser is green. 3, company name in browser bar. All those go, can't say that anymore. The ones that are left are activates HTTPS, displays the padlock symbol. Both of those you get from DV. The third one, dynamic Sectigo security seal. You can put a bitmap on your page. That'll learn them. So that has to go. DigiCert, and we're going to come back to DigiCert soon too while I'm on my CA rampage today. DigiCert screen has a screen grab of a browser. It's got the entity name there, your company name Inc. US. That has to go. Can't advertise that anymore. Protect your protect your most valuable asset, your brand. I'm pretty sure that has to go because that seems to be referring to the brand. And again, another bullet point here. DigiCert streamlines the validation process to give you a quick and pain-free experience. I don't disagree with that. You know what? I think I highlighted the wrong thing here because I think I should have highlighted the one above that which says build trust in your brand by allowing users to confirm your identity. Having said that, users, again, still can confirm your identity. They just have to drill down to the certificate, which no one, asterisk, rounds down to no one because it's basically like a tiny fraction of 1% actually does. So there's that. The SSL store. Incidentally, I'm picking on organisations who said some really stupid shit before, and I'll get to what the SSL store has said in the past as well. They're going to have to change stuff. They're promoting EV here with the headline, add eye-catching trust indicators. Yoink, gone. The remaining eye-catching trust indicators are the same as DV and OV. They're going to have to get rid of the bit here which says when you receive an EV SSL certificate, you'll be able to showcase your identity right next to the URL in the address bar. Nothing makes a stronger first impression than your verified proof of identity being the first indicator a potential customer sees. Yeah, that shit's gone. So you're going to have to get rid of that too, guys. I'm enjoying this too much. This, not just the coffee. Mind you, it is very nice to get back to some, I would say, middle decent coffee after the US. I know it's a contentious topic. Wait till I get back to Australia. So they've then got another screen cap of browser, verified company US, that goes. And they basically just have to delete a whole bunch of this. I picked on who are these guys again? The SSL store here. The SSL store is kind of a funny one too because you go to the sslstore.com. Now, if we're talking visible trust indicators by virtue of EV, you would think that when you go to the sslstore.com, the entity name would be the sslstore.com, and you would go, well, this is good. I am seeing independent verification that the entity that controls this website is the same as the domain name I just entered. That would be logical. Instead, what you see when you go to the sslstore.com is Rapid Web Services. Who the hell are they? How does that help you build trust? That doesn't make any sense. Now, mind you, that's what you see today. You won't see that in Chrome in less than 1 month. And you won't see that in Firefox the month after that. So, that's it. I'm struggling to think of value propositions that remain for EV. Now, actually, just to be clear, this has got nothing to do with code signing certificates. So a bunch of people have said, hey, if you want to have like Windows Smart Screen, trust your code signing certificate, it must be EV. That's fine. We're just talking about HTTPS on the web, different story. So, yeah, that's very, very obvious from everything I've highlighted here. But some people did call that out. I'm really curious to see, as we get closer to the points where the browsers kill off those indicators altogether, how the commercial CAs change their messaging. Because if they're still using these messages when it's not even shown, I think it would be really interesting to speak to some of the consumer protection agencies in the various parts of the world and say, hey, someone is selling a product here, advertising something which they actually can't deliver on. Also, I think it would be interesting. I'm going to read the way I put it here. What does this mean for people who paid good money for EV certs that now won't look any different to DV? I know precisely what I'd do if I was sold something that didn't perform as advertised and became indistinguishable from free alternatives. Wouldn't that be interesting? If you've paid for an EV cert, particularly recently, because normally you get 2 years out of an EV cert, and now these announcements are there, I would love to hear from you if you want to ask one of these commercial CAs for your money back, because it now can't deliver on what they promised you'd get. Wouldn't that be an interesting angle? Get in touch. All right, so this is part one of like my 3-part commercial CA rant today. Now, to pause there, I'm not against commercial CAs. I'm not against people buying certificates. I'm not against EV. I'm not against OV. I'm against the misrepresentation of the efficacy of anything. And over and over and over again, there's misrepresentation of what EV does. We've just gone through that. And the browser vendors have now basically said, yes, it just simply doesn't do what they said it would do. That's why we're getting rid of it. That's the thing I have the issue with. If Sectigo, DigiCert and all the others turn around tomorrow and go, look, we agree it doesn't actually work as advertised, it still has benefit for like 0.01% of people who drill down. So if you would like to buy it in order to support those people, then great. Some people have said, look, there are some federal requirements for some government agencies. I think they were referring to government agencies in the US. Well, yes, like if you have to do it, you have to do it. Go and do it, but go and do it for that reason, not because you think you're going to get some benefit that actually doesn't exist. All right, so there's that. Now, continuing on the anti-CA rant here. And again, it's not that I'm against commercial CAs, it's just that I'm against bullshit. Scott has a thread here calling out DigiCert. Now, this relates to some proposed changes to the maximum validity period for a certificate. Now, round numbers, we used to have a maximum validity period of 3 years. You get a 3-year certificate. It went down to 2 years. There are now proposals to bring it down to 1 year. And the proposals are there for a number of reasons, not least of which is that revocation is fundamentally broken. Scott has a blog post on revocation is broken. Go and have a look at it, it's very interesting. One of the things that will cause a hard fail on any sort of certificate revocation is if the certificate is expired. If you get a 2-year certificate today and you need to revoke it tomorrow, you've got basically 2 years where, because of the fundamentally broken nature of revocation, an adversary may be able to use that certificate to intercept traffic. In a 2-year window, if you go to Let's Encrypt and you get a 3-month certificate and it gets compromised tomorrow, you've got a 3-month window. So you've got like 8 times more risk if there's a compromise straight after you get the certificate with an EV certificate than what you do a DV certificate with a short lifespan. So lots of reasons to reduce the lifetime. I will link to this as well, and you can read all this in detail if you'd like. Now, if you reduce the lifetime, you have to get certificates more regularly. Let's say twice as frequently if you're doing your EV that was 2 years and now it's going to be 1 year. One of the things you might consider is automating renewal. Because if you have to do something important over and over again, you should automate it. Anyone arguing against that has got rocks in their head, and there are people arguing against that, rocks in their head. Once you get to the point of automation, then you start to look at, well, how do we automate certificates? Well, we could use things like an ACME client. Now you're back to Let's Encrypt and Bypass, and anyone else who wants to implement ACME, any certificate authority can do it. Now, that poses a risk to commercial CAs who wanted to sell certificates. And if they could sell long-running certificates, they could sell them for quite a large amount of money because you're selling a 2-year certificate rather than a 1-year certificate. And then every 2 years, not so bad, you come back, you just got to pay your money, you get another certificate. There is obviously a feeling of being threatened by certificates with shorter-lived lifespans. What we see from commercial CAs time and time again is that when their business model gets threatened, they come up with a bunch of bullshit to try and justify it. So let's read through Scott's tweets. First tweet says, sad to see DigiCert doubling down on their fight against shorter certificates. The information contained in this blog post is also questionable. He used a different word when he explained what he thought of it to me. So, He says, take the first thing mentioned in the proposed security benefits. Nobody ever said that shorter certs would stop, hinder, or otherwise impact malicious sites. So why is this being mentioned here? So DigiCert has said, this change has absolutely no effect on malicious websites, which operate for very short periods from a few days to a few weeks at most. That's an absolute straw man argument because it has nothing to do with the proposal. The proposal is not about getting rid of malicious websites. The proposal is about the other benefits you get from short-lived certificates. So why that is in there is just, it's either beyond me or it's just misdirection to try and get people focusing on problems that it doesn't solve rather than problems that it does. Now they make another, I'm going to read their comment that he's highlighted and then his comments about it. But isn't the responsibility of those managing the certificate ecosystem to come up with compliance rules that can endure for at least that long? Scott says, this is a fair point, but somewhat disingenuous. We've had issues in the past, like SHA-1 deprecation and others, where the rules need to be changed ahead of the problem, and the changes are met with massive resistance because there's no problem yet. Can't have it both ways. So basically, it's a bit cart and horse sort of thing. Like, do we need to have the problem first, or do we try and be preemptive? Now, they've also said the bottom line here, rapidly reducing certificate lifetimes to 1 year or even less has significant cost to many companies which rely on digital certificates to protect their systems. Scott's comments in mind. So Scott says, rapidly reducing. The ballot has been proposed almost 1 year ahead of implementation because they're talking about this coming into effect sometime in 2020. And more than 1 year after the previous change. It's not really rapid, but the choice of language is designed to make the proposal look irresponsible. The other thing here is that sometimes we need to give organisations a bit of pressure to do the right thing. I mean, think about things like the fact that browsers are now saying not secure if you're on HTTP. Or you go back a little while, they started saying not secure when there was a password entry field. We've sort of been rapidly moving in this direction, which is holding organisations to greater account to do things properly. Now, whether that's properly in terms of actually using HTTPS in the first place, or properly in terms of automating the renewal of certificates so that we can do things like reduce lifespans, I don't have a problem with this. If you're in an enterprise arguing that this is a problem, there's probably going to be something else wrong which is causing this. There are some other things, some other things in the pipeline I can't say yet, which I think are going to have an interesting impact on this. Now, there's another point here from DigiCert. And these changes have no impact on bad actors who are engaged in illegal activity or impersonating legitimate companies. It's not meant to. Scott says, again, see my previous point, no one said this has anything to do with phishing. No one. In DigiCert's bottom line, they say it has no benefit. So in fact, the full sentence here is, these changes make it significantly more difficult for many companies to protect their internet traffic and customers with no benefit, and therefore DigiCert has no choice to oppose these changes. There is a benefit. We just covered it around the revocation thing, and Scott actually then links to his thing about why we need shorter lifespans. Scott says, I'm really trying not to be cynical here, but a big CA coming out against shorter certs with statements like what are in this post stinks of acting in the interest of their big commercial enterprise customers who simply don't want to change. It should be unsurprising that Let's Encrypt came out in support of this ballot because they don't have the same concern. Free from profits, they are often the guiding light on what is best for the ecosystem and not what is most profitable for them. And we keep coming back to this. And regardless of how important they think this issue is, you can't escape all the other bullshit that's come out about the efficiency or the efficacy rather of EV, which we now know is useless because the browsers are actually chucking it out. Fun final tweet from Scott on this. He's comparing the DigiCert post from August 12, a few days ago, 2019, to a DigiCert post from Feb 4, 2016. The Feb 4 2016 blog post title from DigiCert is How Short-Lived Certificates Improve Certificate Trust. Like, which one is it, guys? Like, what is in your best interest? It just sucks. It really sucks. This industry needs such a shake-up, and it's getting it too. Now, last screwy certificate thing, and this one is a real zinger. I was speaking to Scott as this was unfolding, and now the thing is out there and it's public. So let's have a look. Let's see if I can open this on my iPad. Copy that. Go to here. So this is a little bit of an odd scenario where someone found the private key of a certificate floating around the web. Now I'm going to read you this guy's tweets, Tom Wassenberg. Now Tom's got an interesting tweet thread here. He says, so a few weeks ago I came across a private key used for a TLS certificate posted online. That's a big no-no. The whole idea of a private key is that you keep it private. These should never be public, hence the private. Good point, Tom. And every trusted CA is obliged to revoke any certificate they issued when they became aware its private key is compromised. So, if you find a public key floating, or a private key, floating around the web, and you were to report that to a CA, they need to revoke the certificate. So Tom says, so when I informed the issuing CA, Sectigo, so those guys again, about this, they promptly revoked the cert. Good job, Sectigo, right thing to do. 2 weeks later, however, I receive an angry email from the company using the cert CC'd to their lawyer. That would not be a fun feeling, blaming me for a disruption in the services they provide. So Tom has done exactly the right thing. He's found this key. Now, he hasn't said how he's found this key. Maybe it was a Google search, but obviously it's publicly exposed somewhere. Look, if he's able to see it, there's something wrong. Doesn't matter how he sees it, there's something wrong. Actually, it kind of does. Like, assuming the guy wasn't like literally breaking into their web servers or something, which by no accounts appears to be the case. Let's say they published it to a public GitHub repository or something. So he's done the right thing. Reported to Sectigo. Sectigo's killed the cert. But obviously what's happened is Sectigo has then passed on his personal information to the company for which they killed the cert. So it comes back here and it says, the company explicitly mentioned Sectigo HQ was so kind, in quotes. So inevitably, this is what they said, to give them my contact info. It was a complete surprise to me that Sectigo HQ would do this without my consent, especially seeing how the info was used to badger me. So no way in the world should Sectigo have taken his personal information and then given it to the company who exposed their key. Now, to be clear, it wasn't Sectigo's fault that this organisation has exposed their private key. They've obviously cocked something else up. It was their fault that they then passed on the personal information of the person who reported it, who's then received what seems like a veiled legal threat. After getting confirmed by Scott Helm that this isn't common practice, good on Scott, I contacted Sectigo HQ, who apologised. When pressing a bit more, they let me know that it had happened due to human error by an agent incorrectly selecting what was sent to the certificate subscriber. Now, interestingly, Sectigo, formerly Komodo CA, formerly Komodo, has had human error before. When they revoked the certificate for Ian Carroll, so I mentioned Stripe Inc. before, so Ian literally got a certificate, an EV certificate for Stripe Inc. Sectigo, or I think it was Komodo CA at the time, revoked it. Komodo CA later blamed that on human error. They said they shouldn't have revoked it because it was a legally registered entity and Ian met all the baseline requirements and everything for getting the certificate. So Tom goes on. As the proof for revocation due to compromised key, they say they've updated the processes / training, etc. to prevent this from happening again, but you may still want to mask your identity when sending a revocation request to Sectigo HQ in the future. And this is a shame, right? Because the guy's out there trying to do the right thing. Sectigo obviously screwed that up, but the organisation who then sends him an angry letter fundamentally doesn't understand how these things work either. Tom finishes by saying you may be doing the right thing by preventing the abuse of leaked private keys, but that doesn't mean you won't piss people off whose business relies on the use of such keys. Now, this is just kind of all kinds of crap on behalf of the organisation and Sectigo, and it's a shame that Tom found himself in that position. As far as I know, the whole thing has calmed down. I can't imagine any proper basis for any legal action or anything against him. But it's never going to be a fun feeling getting a letter that mentioned lawyers. So I feel bad for Tom on that, but at least it worked out okay. So that was like the commercial CA bashing session. And again, like I don't have an issue with the idea of selling certificates. I just have an issue with behaviour like what I was just talking about. I have gone on a bit today. I thought it was interesting. I know I haven't done a lot of dedicated blog posts lately due to the volume of work. I do have a lot of stuff I desperately want to finish, and I'm seriously thinking about just having a little bit of time out just to try and churn through some of that stuff. In the interim, sponsor this week is StrongDM, as it has been for the last couple of weeks as well, so big thanks to those guys. They're talking about how Splunk CISO says StrongDM enables you to see what happens, replay and analyze incidents. You can't get that anywhere else. So please go and check out StrongDM if you have a moment. They help me do what I do, so big thanks to the folks over there. So that is it. It stopped raining. It's still kind of cold. It's up to 17 degrees now. When I come to you from Australia next week, it is going to be somewhat warmer. It's almost certainly going to be sunny, and I'm going to see if I can get out in the boat and do that, just so I have that nice peaceful environment to come to you from. And who knows what will happen on the Cybers between now and then. Thank you very much for watching. See you from Oz next week.